Welcome to the dynamics of everyday life, where we demystify some tricky concepts and get to know ourselves a little bit better. Welcome back to the dynamics of everyday life. The week that I'm producing this episode is a very exciting one for me, and it's a big deal in the growth of the dynamics of everyday life as a business, as I launch my first training course this week. It's called Essential Psychodynamics for Coaches, and it's another way that I can share psychodynamic knowledge, psychodynamic nuggets in an accessible format. By now, I'm sure you know my view that we're all way more intelligent than we realise, and if we had the understanding of some psychological concepts, then we could understand why we make decisions and choices and think about whether these are the right ones for us in this moment. I'm starting with coaches, as that's a world I know well. But if there's lots of interest, then I'll bring out versions for both business and everyday life. Almost a podcast plus. Am I anxious? Yes. Understandably. Is this my first rodeo? No. I've trained many people over the years, back from when I was running mental health services, and I was training people on how to complete risk assessments, right through to corporate work and mental health awareness. One of my favourite sessions here was when I was training a room full of lorry drivers around the importance of mental health and well-being. I'm not going to lie, I was quite apprehensive about this, but I've never had a more engaged group who listened and responded to the content and each other. It was truly incredible, and it was also a key learning point for me around assumptions. I've also trained many coaches in coach training programs, in webinars and in masterclasses, so I've got a fair idea of what I'm doing. And I've always assumed that I'm a pretty competent trainer in whatever aspect of coach training that I am doing. I've had lots of feedback over the years that would suggest that this is again a fair assumption. However, being competent in something doesn't necessarily mean that you're at your happiest. And it's the people who know me well who can identify where I am at my happiest. My husband has walked past my office when I've been teaching psychodynamics and said, "That's your area, you need to focus on that." And then my daughter did some work experience with me and pointed out it was clear to her where I was happiest. I didn't like to think that I wasn't happy doing what I was doing for the other part of the time, because then what would that say about me? Anyway, after a few plot twists, I now get the chance to focus on what makes me happy. And I'm lucky to be able to do that from here on in. Last year wasn't the easiest for me, so I'm not going to give you some Disney-fied version that you just have to follow your dreams. Most likely, you're going to have to kiss a lot of work frogs before you meet your handsome prince, or the people who really are in your camp. And going with the frog analogy, sometimes it can feel like you're a frog in a pot of water, slowly getting boiled, not realising that things aren't working in your best interests. How does this tie in with the title? I probably have gone a bit off tangent, which I am prone to do. There is a tenuous link, I promise you. But I also need to give you a bit of context before I can make my point. Regular listeners to the podcast know how much I love my trips to Paris, and a big part of these is the food and the restaurants that we go to. We have done the let's just see where we find, and ended up either getting hangry because we can't find anywhere, or on one notable trip, eating in the same place 3 times in a row, which is why we now book ahead, and we stick with some old classics. One of our favourites we call Man with the Hat, as the main man, I'm assuming he's the owner, as he's very front of house and involved, he always used to wear a boater hat. Didn't matter what the weather was, sun, rain, wind, the hat would be on. Anyway, we love this restaurant. We'd be greeted like old friends, we'd be given our aperitifs at the best table, and nothing was too much trouble for him. We particularly liked the table we were given, as we could have a good nose at the other diners and decide on what was going on in their bios. One trip last year, we turned up and he was pleased to see us as normal. And then he disappeared for the rest of the evening. Very unusual. We had another waiter who we named Feliciano, as he bore more than a passing resemblance to tennis player Feliciano Lopez. He was perfectly fine with us, but it wasn't the same. There was no additional chat, nothing. A man with the hat seemed to be distracted. I went again a few weeks after this with another friend. Really makes me sound like a bon vivant. Not the case, just by chance. And we had the same experience. On this visit, I was a bit more observant, and I noticed that the man with the hat and Feliciano were clearly closer than work colleagues. Now, I recognise here that I am making up narratives, and I do counsel against this in other episodes. But hear me out. When we went again in February this year, there was no sign of Feliciano, and man with the hat was back to his normal self. In fact, he was more exuberant, bringing extra drinks over, which turned out to be on the house, and stopping to chat. Feliciano was not in the picture anymore, and the man with the hat was clearly happier. So, what's my point? My point is that sometimes we don't know what's making us unhappy. Sometimes it can be seen by other people and not ourselves. This is where it can become tricky, because if someone has ever tried to tell you that they don't think your choices are right, chances are you're going to dig your heels in and defend your decisions. Ever been told by friends or family they don't like your boyfriend or girlfriend? I suspect that even if you know they were right, you clung to that relationship even more in that moment because you didn't want to think that you might be wrong, or even have some shame around this. We're at our happiest when we're making the right choices for us and having people around us who lift us up. This isn't as easy to achieve as it sounds, as humans are complex and complicated beings. We don't like to admit when we get things wrong, and we will defend ourselves against anxiety, guilt and shame wherever we can. Remember, we'll do this for good reasons. We've learnt that this behaviour keeps us safe. A couple of key ones that come up for us a lot are denial and rationalisation. If we're denying something, we deny that there's a problem or that we're unhappy, because to confront it will be too anxiety-inducing for us. It becomes too much to bear, so we have a move along the bus please, there's nothing to see here attitude, because it's easier for us to manage. And then if something does creep into our awareness, we can bat it away with rationalisation. We've made our decisions because of X, Y and Z. And by doing this, we keep all those difficult, anxious and guilty feelings at bay. My invitation for you this week is for you to consider where in your life you're the happiest and where you aren't. Has someone said to you that you seem happy doing a particular activity or role? Were you surprised by this? Are you denying something to yourself that you really want to do or try? And, as always, give yourself some grace. Once we realise that our defence mechanisms have been tripping us up, it can be incredibly easy to give ourselves a hard time, thinking that we should have known better. Our defence mechanisms are doing exactly what they're trying to do, keep us safe. Once we have the awareness about them, we get the chance to decide whether they are helping us or getting in the way. Looking at ourselves at this level can be challenging and unnerving as we develop our awareness, so I'd always encourage that you do this at your own speed. If you feel you need some extra help around this, then I've put together a PDF resource sheet and you can find the link for this in the show notes. If you'd like to have a chat with me about psychodynamics or whether I'm the right coach, supervisor or mentor for you, then click on the link that's also in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dynamics of Everyday Life. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As well as producing this podcast, The Dynamics of Everyday Life has lots more psychodynamic fun going on, and you can find out more at dynamicsofeveryday.life.